I think we're recording. So, welcome. It's Winder Lyons and Eddie Stone, and we're doing our. It's no longer a fireside chat because it's summer.
Yeah.
So it's not yet AC chat.
It is here, and I really should have thought about it because just to control noise, I shut some doors, and I realized my ventilation isn't as good when the doors are shut. So I'm starting to perspire already. So I should have done the AC chat.
It's a sweat chat.
We'll be warmed up.
Uh,
We'll be warmed up.
There we are. So today, for the first of two calls, we're going to be discussing our what it means to be organic, our certifications and testing, and that's quite a big deal. And I know there's a lot to it. So why don't you lead us into that quagmire of stuff and see where we go?
Sure. And my whole effort here would be to bring some clarity to folks and not some confusion. So just know that's my intention on the outset. So, and probably where some of this came from is a few folks probably saw online through social media that I was just in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago for Organic Week. And I think that was a new term for a lot of people. And I realized we've probably not spoken about that before. But we are a member of the Organic Trade Association. And the Organic Trade Association is really a collection of farmers, manufacturers, processors, sellers, basically people that are stakeholders in the organic business, right? The organic trade. And the Organic Trade Association is really just that lobbying arm and maybe the sort of the community organizer to pull that group together to fight for common laws with respect to regulation or to try to seek federal funding for research regarding organic, which this won't surprise anybody is woefully neglected. Almost all of the money is really being spent on conventionally grown fruits, vegetables, grains, and the like. And I mean, really, it's sort of this lopsided situation because those gazillion dollar companies, big food, big agro, that can afford to do that research themselves, they're actually pulling all the federal dollars in, and the small community of organic is struggling to get some of those dollars. But that's probably a discussion for another time, and maybe a discussion because it gets into politics we probably shouldn't have. So, but we're members of the Organic Trade Association, so we were there for the week. And it's really always fascinating for me because it allows me to have some very personal exposure to seed producers, input producers. And so when you hear in farming the term input, you're talking about a fertilizer supplier or in the case of conventional pesticide supplier of those raw materials. And so the entire community sort of comes together. And what I found is it allows me to just broaden my awareness of the impact of these things downstream. And really for Maria and I, and my wife Maria is really a tremendous advocate of these things. We call her the Chief Sustainability Officer, but we probably should call her the Chief Accountability Officer because of her commitment in her personal life and how that bleeds over into what we do. And we're all committed, but it's always good to have that passionate flag bearer inside the organization. And so let me try to break this down into ways that I think everybody here will understand. I'm sure a lot of folks that are members of the Touchstone family and advocate for what we do or build teams surrounding what we do, one of their interests are that we have really clean labels. You know, they're easy to read and understand. And in fact, even for a lay person, with the exception of the prebiotics and the enzymes, they have pretty easily pronounced names. Now, I have to admit the plant-based enzymes and pro and prebiotics, this is some odd names. But so the rest of it, though, is pretty clean to understand. And that's part of who we are. And part of what we do. We want to support that. And we want to provide that to our families. It's what we believe in. And then you see organic on our labels. You'll also see some things like non-GMO and various other statements to try to help people sort of understand what's inside the canister or what's inside the bottle. But what a lot of people don't realize is when you go out there into the marketplace and you're buying something, when you see organic, and it's also associated with a certification. So this is really critical. Organic, absent of some type of certification, really should make a consumer very skeptical, because that's somebody really probably operating outside of the known boundaries that provide us with some sort of assurance of what organic means. In our case, we use Quality Assurance International. They're really QAI. You'll see the insignia on our bottles, on our canisters. It's really sort of the largest group, we think, in the most robust group from a cross-checking standpoint to make sure that, you know, what a broker tells us about broccoli or blueberries is actually true. Because you do reach a point where our own reach as an organization has some limitations, right? I can go visit a farm, but I'm not going to be there for every harvest. I can have staff go visit the farm, but they're, again, not going to be there for every part of the process. So you rely on these third parties to give us some assurance, but as consumers, you want that as well. It also means that we're forced to follow the rule of law completely, or we can't use their seal on our bottles, on our website. So for example, if you look at our capsuled products, those are vegan capsules that we use. Formerly, they have owned the USDA organic seal. There's been some challenges back and forth inside that arena, and so there's some debate. And so in order to use organic on those products, we have to have the QAI seal, but because of the capsules, even though they're vegan, it isn't the same as the powdered products, which actually carry, because they don't have the capsules. And this is where we get off into the weeds. They carry the USDA seal. But all of that is to say that when you see a certified organization that you're able to use organic wording with and or the USDA organic seal, that consumer should feel confidence that is exactly what it's intended to be, and there's accountability associated with those seals. Really critical to realize that.
So does that mean that people who don't have those certifications can say they're organic, but they're actually not, and they could slip in some artificial something here and there, and who would know?
That's completely true, but actually it's worse than that. They're actually not following what are the suggested guidelines for GMP as dictated by the FTC, who would play the role here from an advertising standpoint. They're really not supposed to use the word organic at all. Now, because of the limitations of regulatory reach, they're probably going to do that for a long time, particularly if they're a sort of a small shop and have nobody really sort of dive into it. But this is where, for example, if you look at Amazon, which there's a lot of supplements sold on Amazon, and some with really super sophisticated labeling, and you'll see the word organic used with no certification. There's probably about a 95% chance that that is a product that was completely manufactured and produced in China. Now, in and of itself, that does not mean that the product is bad, but it also means there's not a whole lot of check and balance going on that product, and probably the entity that owns that brand has no intentions of really being a permanent brand. You know, they're not out really trying to build a community. They're just competing for largely on price and what consumers' interests are. So they probably use organic in the description of the product on Amazon because they're using it as a keyword. Mm-hmm. Simply like advertising. A consumer goes to on Amazon and says, I want organic vitamin D. Their product will pop up in that representation because they have organic as a long tail keyword in their title. Doesn't mean at all that that product really is organic. So unfortunately, there's a whole lot of buyer beware out here. I'll give you another example. You see a product such as blueberries or strawberries that are advertised as being non-GMO. And they may have a badge on the product that says non-GMO or the official verified non-GMO badge. So consumers look at that, and make an extension in their mind's eye that that product must also be organic. Not true. First off, there's I'm unaware of any strawberry, blueberry products that are ever genetically modified. We actually have some legal rules against and then also governing what can be genetically modified. Some of these very basic fruits and vegetables just simply cannot by law in our country, but they're playing on the consumer's interest and fear of genetically modified. Well, truth is, most of those products are grown by conventional means with synthetic inputs, meaning fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, fungicides. So all of those things that a person's really trying to avoid, they haven't avoided them at all. And so I'll just say my personal opinion. I'm 55 years old. I've been doing this for 30 plus years. The two most important things for you, if you're trying to bring some assurance to your family and for the people that you influence, is you're looking for organic on the label and you're looking for a certification of some kind. So we use QAI, which we think is the best organization given our circumstance, but certainly Oregon Tilth out in Oregon. That's a great organization, more regional than say what we work with, but you are looking for someone, and really that's the most important aspect of this. Where is the certification process coming from? You don't want it just to be the company. That's really not good enough. Now, we have some products that don't have that because it's just simply not available in the arena. So let's take our Pure Body Extra. They don't have that assurance because it's just, there's not a way that fits into that model. So here the consumer is going to have to take a little leap of faith at it with us and say, they've got so many practices here and there that they're spending money to do. I'm going to have some confidence that they're going to do it here. And then they can go look at our labs to see that the products are free of pesticides, herbicides, synthetics, whatever it happens to be. So that's one way we answer that question. The same thing really is true for the CBD products. That is an industry that's probably about 18 months away from really getting all of the organic certification, paperwork with QAI, all of those things properly approved. There are some localized community organic certifications being offered, but for a national or really an international organization like ours, doesn't really work. And what we really need first is those full FDA guidelines, and then all those things can take place. But we do those certifications on those organics that you see on the label. But I do recognize it does create some convolution to the whole process. But eco-labeling is important. And so let me give you a couple things to think about. I realize this was supposed to be short, but I really want folks to consider what I'm about to share. There are what I call the small picture issues and the big picture issues here. The small picture issue is really when you buy organic, sort of the localized effect. We know with the limited amount of research that's available to us, and there needs to be more research, that when you sort of go side by side with an organically grown fruit or vegetable or a conventionally grown fruit or vegetable, the majority of the time there's going to be a potency difference in favor of organic, right? And so consumer is trying to buy more healthy, and there's reason to have some confidence that that's taking place. But we need a lot more research to really completely support that aspect up in terms of potency. We further know that the likelihood of residue or residual chemicals being on an organic product is just less. That isn't to mean we excuse the fact that currently laws would allow an organic field and a synthetic field to be next to each other, and you could have some cross-contamination. And so that's why when we get our certificates of analysis, we're looking at those numbers to make sure that no pesticides, herbicides bled over into what we're doing. But when you buy organic, you're going to have more assurance of that end product that you carry to your family's dinner table is cleaner, right? And I think that's part of what we're looking for, right? One of the challenges with the conventional fruit and vegetable industry, you and I both know that almost all of those inputs, whether we're talking about the fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, are made of man-made chemicals, petroleum chemicals, and these are chemicals that essentially become forever chemicals for generations to come of the Winder-Lyons family. Those inputs are going to remain in the soil, in the environment, in the water supply of all of us. And so I do think we have a tendency to be somewhat narrow-minded on these things. And I understand that. We've got self-preservation for our family. We're trying to think of these things. And so we're buying this, and we're thinking mostly about the impact on our family and our family's dinner table. However, this is what I want you to do. I want you to think more broadly about the impact of organic on the farmers and the farmers you're supporting, but the health of the soil, which is completely different, right? You look at conventional farming, that soil quality, the life and the health of that soil versus organic, two entirely different discussions to be had. So it's how the earth is impacted. That local community, which is likely a rural community that doesn't have the same resources as a big urban community, right? So their municipal water system for the water runoff from those conventional fields going into that local county, city, municipal system, what those local citizens face. Although places like Flint, Michigan, which are this horrific sort of thing with the lead in the water for the past several years, you go all over the Southwest and the Midwest, and you look at rural communities, and they're elevated, unacceptable by EPA standards of chemicals in the water supply is through the roof, and those impacts are coming from two things. One, big companies will locate in those poor areas because they know that that workforce has no options. They will locate chemical factories of various kinds, particularly ones that don't have to be near a coastline or a massive water supply, because those folks will just take the job and ignore their own interest long-term of the health of the local community from an environmental standpoint. So conventionally grown products has an impact, not just in our house, but in those folks, in the health of their children, animal welfare, water quality for a lifetime, soil quality for a lifetime on these forever chemicals, and air quality less permanently, but still there. So I want people to think that the biggest impact you have here, because it's very difficult given the scope of business at the federal legislative level, and frankly, even at the local state level, the biggest vote you have is with your dollars, because companies pay attention to that. At the event that I was at, Quaker Oats and General Mills were there, which mostly sell, right? That's mostly products that are dealt with conventional products. However, because of changing consumer taste, they're having to spend more time and money in developing the organic side of our business. Now, I'm an incrementalist. My kids probably get frustrated with me because I'm willing to fight the battle and win it incrementally over time. You know, they want to rip the Band-Aid off, but sometimes I just don't see it being able to be that way. But for example, General Mills was going to return 1 million acres of farmland this year that formerly was used for conventional practices to organic. It's a drop in the bucket, but it's a drop that wasn't there before. So when you vote with your dollars, not just when you buy from us, but when you go to the grocery store, just know your household, we believe, is being positively impacted, but you're impacting some farm family and what's on their table and what's in their land and what's in their community. So I get fired up on this because I want us to think about it beyond our own dollars and cents. And the truth of the matter is, for most people, you're talking about a 1 to 3% increase in expense associated with the food. And with scale, it doesn't have to be any increased. But I do see that 1 to 3%. And hey, look, I'm willing to admit I can afford it, right? And so everybody's got to make decisions that are wise for their household. If that's a small tax I've got to pay when I go to the local store and I buy organic, sort of that non-recognized tax, I'll pay that because of what I'm supporting there. And, you know, a favorite saying of mine is a Greek proverb that says, a society is in good shape when adults will plant trees it actually says men, but when adults will plant trees, that they will never see reach the height of maturity because they're investing in generations to come. For me, that's the broader picture, the big picture of organic that I want us all to digest and understand. If you don't care, you don't care. But I think caring about these things has a really broad implication for not just our local communities, but our national and frankly, the world.
I think it's maybe a little more practically important, even if you take a little broader view. There are doctors and scientists these days suggesting that up to 80% of all of our degenerative illnesses, conditions, problems have a root cause in toxicity. And if that's true, and I don't doubt that it is, it's probably more than that. If you look at the health of our society, you're going to pay now for better quality, or what does it cost to have cancer or Parkinson's or et cetera? I mean, what's the real value and impact in your life of this stuff? And I think that, you're taking a nice I'm more of a rip the Band-Aid off and whack them in the head with their own arm never mind. But, we're at crisis stage, and the issues are the industries own the politicians, and we're not getting what's truthful and what's right. We're getting what can be bought, and by big ag and et cetera, and they don't care about you and I and our families. They care about their bottom line. And what we're presenting here is so different and so wholesome and so healthy. It's insane not to get it and want to participate, in my view. But I'm like your kids. I'm a little bit more radical, and I'm okay with that. You nice, moderate, middle of the road. You incredibly articulate. You go that way. But I really want to jump in on this and say to everybody that's listening to this, pay attention. This is a lot more important than you get. And I used to, in my early life, I was selling water treatment equipment. And we had a gal in our office whose child had died from water pollution. Mm-hmm. She never missed a sale because, but that, as horrific as that is, it's kind of what we're talking about. These are not benign substances. And if you're stuck in some place and you can't get away from that, we have an answer. And the best one I've ever found in our zeolites. If there's not a better detoxification product on the planet, in my view, you want to get the bad stuff out of your system. This is how you do it. But let's get back to what you're saying. Prevention is definitely the way to go. And, we have solutions, but that's secondary.
Yeah. And just to your point, two things you said there. One, the toxicity issue is real. And I believe the bulk of our audience understands that. But just to outline the dynamics, it's because toxicity really creates an inflammatory response, secondarily can cause a negative autoimmune response, right? This is where, from a disease standpoint, this is how it impacts us. I have passion for this. My biggest thing is I'm trying to find some people that don't yet understand and get them on board, because we're going to win this with numbers and strength. And I'm proud of our community because every day we grow. And to me, that's just one more person we've really raised awareness with. And so, and I do think it takes the passionate to cause that occur. And so, to your passion, Winder, thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. This has been absolutely a brilliant conversation. We've covered it. We have testing on everything we do. People can find out exactly everything they need to know about this stuff. You can't say that a rock is organic, although it is, but we can sure say that it's clean. So the zeolites are sort of lumped in with the organics.
And we could say it's not synthetically made, right? Rocks can be synthetic. There's plenty of synthetic zeolite, but those zeolites are not the ones that enjoy the GRAS status and we understand the safety about, right? So that's one of the reasons why that rock, being a real rock, is important.
Well, isn't there more to a rock than chemicals? I mean, who knows what's actually, God designs into these things that we don't even know about. what's the vibratory impact of all this stuff? If you want to get into the weeds a little bit.
Way above my pay grade, but I know there's something there.
Brilliant conversation as usual, sir. So we'll take a little break and then we'll get into our second recording and talk about some other stuff. But anything else you want to add into this conversation before we draw to a close here?
I just want to say how much I appreciate our family and the tribe we've got here. I couldn't be more proud when I was at that organic week to represent this wonderful group of people associated with Touchstone. I was proud of it.
Well, thank you for enabling this whole thing to happen. We'll reanimate our conversation in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks.